The key elements, if a PM wants to bring that startup mindset to a corporate environment, would be what?
So you're going to get kind of metaphorically punched in the face a lot, and it's just like rolling with the punches, staying positive. It's incumbent on a PM in a giant company to build up a Rolodex of all the possible people who can be allies and advocates and partners.
What really are the differences between like a startup PM job and a corporate PM job?
Startup, it's like, hey, we got this idea. What's the cheapest way I could validate that? Well, I know somebody. Let me talk to him. Hey, I've got something. Can we like collaborate with you on an opportunity here that could solve really compelling problems for you? Let's get on a call, show you what I've got, talk about what you've got. Enterprise thing is great. Let's put a plan together. Maybe we can get that out in a year and a half, realistically.
What is kind of your latest and greatest sort of strategic approach to the job search?
I've definitely come to appreciate this notion of think about yourself as like an SDR and you are trying to essentially growth hack your own career. Like, how can I get into the hearts and minds of these decision makers in clever ways that no one's thought of before that position me in a unique way?
I'm really excited to have Scott Jones here with us today. Not only is he one of the most senior PMs in the Triangle, but he's one of my good friends. We've been friends for over 5 years. And he's worked at companies like HP, Lenovo, Digital Turbine, and now he's VP of product at Realeyes. And we're going to talk about some of his hot takes on product management after 15 years in the field. Scott, thanks so much for being here.
I'm so excited. Huge fan of you outside of being a friend. So it's an honor, man. Thank you for having me.
So we've been talking a lot about your various gigs. And I think one of the key themes from all of our conversations is bringing that startup mindset into big enterprises like an HP or like a Lenovo. Can you say more?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was lucky in the way it worked out where I was given opportunities. The first was HPE and a company before that called BASF, where the thesis for hiring me, if you will, was they were explicitly looking for people who did not grow their career inside of a giant company with all of the associated muscle memory you might get from that, if you will. And in particular at HPE, this hiring manager I'd met, he remembered me from a previous interview round with him. It didn't work out at that time, but a year later, he hit me up and said, I was thinking about you because you're so different from all the other candidates I'm traditionally interviewing for opportunities in a storage business. So in particular, they are people who've built their whole careers working on storage appliances, where you can imagine everything that might be baked into that. I'm doing my life cycle and I'm trying to hit iterations of development that ties to factories being able to produce appliances, distribute them globally, channel partnerships, value-added resellers, all of that stuff. They were building a new as-a-service business tied to these storage appliances. And he was looking for people who didn't think like folks who grew their career focused on hardware. So you could abstract that to the idea of we're looking for people with scrappy startup experience who didn't build their careers inside a hardware company to help us think differently. And that is exactly how it played out. So that was super exciting.
So what really are the differences between like a startup PM job and a corporate PM job?
What I found, so it's very interesting. The first thought that popped in my head to answer that, what I found was I was hired in this particular case to work with developers on technical solutions to problems. But the quick version of the backstory was Hewlett-Packard Enterprise acquired a startup called Nimble Storage, who'd and in fact, at that time, you could say they were an enterprise. They were a pretty mature company with a pedigree for very unique storage appliances. They'd built a first instantiation of a solution that would natively connect their appliances to a co-located appliance of the same type that could communicate, co-located next to the hyperscalers, solving this problem of having to ingress data into a particular cloud, run VMs on that, and then say, oh crap, this workload would be better in that other cloud. How can I possibly get it over there? What can I possibly do? The opportunity they found was store your data with us, with them, co-locate it, and then hook it up in VMs from the cloud of your choice. HPE recognized that, saw the opportunity, bought it, and then put it on the shelf. And now this guy was hired to figure out, like, how do we do this? And I was hired originally with the idea of technical work, but it turned out we didn't have enough engineers. So it ended up being understanding old school bureaucratic processes of new product introductions at a company like HPE where it's like 70 years of history of how to de-risk launching things.
Is your product team having trouble in capturing the true voice of customers? That's because user feedback is scattered across channels, making it nearly impossible to catch crucial conversations. It's time you're able to centralize your voice of customer from everything like your CRM, customer portals, call recordings, or even public reviews. That's where Zeta.io comes in, our podcast partner today. With Zeta's AI, you can plug your customer conversations in, and it will allow you to easily slice and dice these into actionable insights for your key product areas so that you can do more to improve NPS scores, analyze features, identify new features, or perhaps understand why you lost a few deals. This paves the way for planning the right features and channeling your efforts into actually planning and building your roadmap to finally close that loop 10 times faster. Product managers around the world use Zeta.io and use it to really improve their product discovery. It's plug and play in just minutes. So visit zeta.io/LPS/AkashGupta to get an extra 10% off.
Learning how, the currency of this is like 150-page PowerPoint documents, and you have to build a steering committee who represents supply chain, legal, pricing, n number of other things, all these constituents. It's incumbent on the product manager to frame the opportunity, build this steering committee, populate this huge deck. That gets you on a train looking out 6 months in the future, where you're trying to get all your ducks in a row to hit that 6-month window, such that you can achieve whatever you want to achieve, including like training salespeople, getting messaging out to the field, messaging out to channel partners, et cetera. So it's a lot of like manual work. It's a lot of diplomacy, et cetera. And it's a lot of doing things the way they've always been done. And so it's explicitly what I was hired. An interesting use case was running an as-a-service cloud consumption business inside of an empirical hardware company. That was essentially the challenge. And it's like, Scott, go figure it out. So it was like hacking this new product introduction cycle, learning about how it normally works, learning, all right, 150 slides. And everyone who manages this tells you, this is how you have to do it. This is how we do it. This is how the sausage gets made. And then it's a bunch of studying, building up hypotheses, test marketing. Like, do I really need to do that? What if I cut this out? Hey, here's my version of the deck. I did like 30 slides. The rest of this isn't relevant. Will that work? And then essentially like learning about the system, hacking it, finding ways to challenge it, and then driving innovation that way. So in that case, I was able to invent a new credit system for cloud consumption, a new type of SKU to sell it. And then like the supply chain hooks such that you didn't have to kind of bastardize hardware SKUs to let someone know this hardware SKU is actually a software SKU, fulfill that order. Like a bunch of crap that got set up. So it's like figuring out all of that stuff, building an idea of the system, finding ways to hack it, building consensus that you can hack it, demonstrating you can, and then setting up like a new sort of beaten track that others can use. So it's intense. It's a lot.
So it sounds like in big enterprise, you're working on a smaller number of features. You're planning them really far out in advance. You're doing a lot of collaboration and stakeholder management versus a startup. You're shipping all the time. You don't have to write the huge documents. You don't have as many n number of stakeholders. Or is that a fair representation?
More elegant way to say it. Yeah. So you can draw a parallel. I've got an idea. We see this opportunity. We've done the research. We think there's this compelling problem to solve. Enterprise thing is great. Let's put a plan together. Maybe we can get that out in a year and a half, realistically. And then it's people like that product manager persona I was describing, figuring out like, all right, I need to assemble people to figure out with me, how can I hit that date? What are all the dependencies I need to work out? What are all the pieces of the puzzle? What are the areas where people are going to throw friction at me? Where I can say, no, it doesn't have to be that way. We can do this way. Startup, it's like, hey, we got this idea. What's the cheapest way I could validate that? Well, I know somebody. Let me talk to him. Hey, I've got something. Can we like collaborate with you on an opportunity here that could solve really compelling problems for you? Let's get on a call, show you what I've got, talk about what you've got. Is there like some, it's a triggering word, hacky way we could like do a pilot of this and demonstrate there's value, talk about it publicly, and then like partner on this? And you can like make that happen in days. Get something happening, learn from it, and figure out where to go. It's just a completely different world. But the idea is you learn so much in that world. You can wear so many hats. You can get such a fascinating view of how to learn fast and find opportunities and move quickly. And the people, if I'm keeping my drawings in the sky, the people on the enterprise side have never done that.
Yeah.
And it's not that you can just come in and say, guys, it's easy. We just build it and try it. But you can say, does it have to be that complicated? Is there a way around? So one example is we built this as a service storage business. We needed a marketing site for it. We tried to go through HPE marketing. They're like, yeah, I can maybe get that in 6 months. So we went rogue and we spun up our own microsite. And it's like, yeah, you get slapped for that. But ultimately we ended up, how it played out was we ended up kind of demonstrating a new way of operating such that at a sort of critical point in this new storage as a service business as a point of evolution, they recognized what we'd achieved and they kind of elevated us and said, like, they're figuring out a path. We should learn from them. So it's an interesting case of being told you can't do that. That's impossible. Starting to show, well, actually, you can kind of operate like this. You can achieve things in a different way. Oh, interesting. Cool. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So the key elements, if a PM wants to bring that startup mindset to a corporate environment, would be what?
Being flexible, open mind. Say open mind, open heart, because you're going to have a lot of people telling you that's impossible. And this really just kind of dovetails to the life of a PM in general, where it's very entrepreneurial and you're pursuing things that people would perceive as like science fiction, not the way we do it. So you're going to get kind of metaphorically punched in the face a lot. And it's just like rolling with the punches, staying positive, often saying like, you're essentially building up. It's incumbent on a PM in a giant company to build up a Rolodex of all the possible people who can be allies and advocates and partners. And these companies are so gigantic that to me, it feels like you're walking around a gymnasium where the lights are off and you've got like a flashlight and you're walking up and you see people and they're doing things and you're like, oh, interesting. I think there's an opportunity for us here, and you explore it and they'll tell you, well, that's impossible. What you're trying to do, you can't do it. But you should go talk to them. So then you walk to the other side of the gymnasium, you meet other people who have other interests that are aligned with you. They give you a breadcrumb on, yeah, that might be possible if this is true. Talk to that person who owns that system. Then you find these other things. So you are like navigating the giant complexity and siloed areas of a huge company to find ways to connect things to drive innovation. Because the company left to its own devices can't do that. All they do is like spawn teams to say, I found a problem to solve. I found a problem to solve. I found a problem to solve. And they don't realize they're all trying to solve the same problem without connective tissue. So that was like another big realization for me about the value someone like us can bring to such an organization where they're just not familiar with that. They're like very much stay in your lane. Here's your objective. Here's 18 months, figure it out. And then ultimately you find out what you built isn't even relevant because it took you too long.
Okay. So is there like a scenario where a PM who wants to bring this startup mentality to enterprise shouldn't? They should just recognize like this is how things are, or should they always kind of strive to make things better?
It's interesting. I'd probably steal an answer from insights I've taken from you where, you might find it like enterprises are not all the same. And depending on the environment, what you're operating in, and you don't know until you go, you can, through the interview process, you can kind of see insights and ideas about, oh, is that how it works here? But you don't really know till you're in it. And when you get in it, borrowing an idea I've seen you and others say, you might find there's more constraints than you expected. So you use it as an opportunity to demonstrate the power of trying it differently. And you essentially generate your own little PR campaign around it. We did it this way. This was new for us. This is what would normally have happened. This is what we achieve now. Here's the marginal impact of that. Here's what we learned. Here's what we're going to try next. Starting to publicize that, get people to kind of look over your shoulder of your team, ideally be able to propagate it across teams so everyone can learn, hey, these guys are doing it a different way. It doesn't have to, the cycles don't have to take this long. The cycles can be faster, for example, or you don't have to necessarily go through these existing paths. They found a new path and it's repeatable and we can share it. So it's that kind of thing. So building relationships, setting expectations on what can be achieved, and then bringing a bunch of people along for the ride. Because when you bring these ideas to them, they're going to say like, you're crazy. You can't do that. And then you show them, oh, wow, you did that. I want to use it.
So now you're at a startup again, and it's in the AI space. And we often hear a lot about generative AI. Everyone would have heard of ChatGPT and Claude and Google Gemini. You're working in the computer vision AI space. Why are we hearing less about that? Is the pace of innovation slower?
It was interesting considering that question when you shared it prior to this session. I was thinking about that. I'm not sure if the pace of innovation has been slower. I've in my 2 years with the company, I've been trying to kind of understand. Well, just to take a step back, the company I joined, Realeyes, was founded in 2007. So very much kind of on the leading edge, waiting for what I call this kind of AI renaissance moment. So they were working on challenges that it wasn't even clear were relevant back then, and finding discoveries that they didn't know the value of. So I will not forget my boss, the CTO, co-founder, describing how in their early days of trying to figure out how to do emotion measurement off of webcams, they stumbled upon an opportunity where they could place face markers, landmarks on a face, and then put things on that. So essentially impose imagery on a face, if you will. And they didn't know what to do with that. They're just like, wow, that's really cool. They didn't know what to do with it. And then Snapchat came out like a year later and said, like, filters, put animals on your face. And they're like, oh shit, that's what we could have done with that. So I'll just say they were very much like feeling out leading edge solutions, but they didn't know the problems they were solving. Now it feels like the problems have caught up. And what I have found, this kind of parlays into some of the interesting work I've been doing and why we are finding success. What I have found is we are differentiated in the computer vision market as it relates to looking at people's faces in a space where others, this dynamic we found with very large tech companies, are shying away from that. It doesn't behoove them from a PR perspective to have the public know that they are working on face models, for example, because the natural question is like, where are you getting that data? Name your name brand company. Where are you getting that from? Why are you doing that? So Google Cloud, for example, as I got into this space 2 years ago, looking at what other players are doing, the hyperscalers and other competitors, Google Cloud doesn't offer attention and emotion measurement anymore. They've like taken down a bunch of features about looking at faces. However, they still do offer an API for object detection, for all sorts of other interesting computer vision capabilities that are high value. But what we found is we are uniquely positioned as it relates to the humanity aspect because of the provenance of the data we have and the consent we have, allowing us to test and train models on it. So I'm not exactly answering your question one-to-one, but this idea of, I feel like computer vision's probably coming back now because the opportunities we're seeing, bringing the humanity aspect to it. So for example, if I'm doing reinforcement learning with human feedback for a large language model, and the prompt was create an image that scares me, and it does, and I give thumbs up, that scared me, or thumbs down. But what if instead you saw like a visceral emotional reaction using a webcam to see the user? I'll try to do a fearful face, like see the user do that, to say, wow, that's a better, more impactful version of a thumbs up. It's like actually getting into the psychology of the user. So all to say, I suspect the human aspect of it is going to come back now as a very powerful signal tied into the AI renaissance. And companies like us, where we have the data provenance, where we are allowed, like we have a good data story to tell. We have like verifiable consent with GDPR compliance saying we are allowed to test and train models on these faces. So I'll just say, I think that's going to happen now with players like us who are entering the fray, who can add value that hasn't been possible before.
So big tech has kind of shied away from the facial recognition and the emotional space.
Caveat on that is AWS. Recognition is very much focused on faces. I would love to I would love to be a fly on the wall in conversations there between their legal team and others, because their competitors, their other kind of on the marquee of like the FANG companies, et cetera, they've backed away, but Amazon continues to kind of double down. So I'm sure it's very interesting conversations about why.
So with GPT-2 to GPT-3, we saw GPT-3 pass the Turing test. And then with GPT-3 to GPT-4, we saw it go from, like 75% on college tests to acing college tests, to acing LSAT, acing admissions. So really, we've had huge jumps from GPT-2, GPT-3, GPT-4 in the last 2 to 3 years. On the vision side, have we had huge jumps? And if so, who is kind of driving that innovation?
It's interesting. I wish I had an informed answer on that to say so, but focus on the narrow lens of the work we do. So looking at faces for attention and emotion measurement, what I've found is that I'm mostly managing through the competitive lens of what I offer versus competitors. I've found that we are in a positioning as a position about Realeyes versus others, but such that we are in a unique position with lightweight models that can run on the client side in ways that haven't been possible before and provide real-time telemetry that others can't provide. In a way such that there's a whole new world of possibilities where you can have hardware, software, what have you, seeing the user in real time and making interesting decisions off of that for curated experiences, whatever. To me, that's kind of where I see all of this going. It's what sort of nature of models, irrespective of the modality. Is it vision? What is it? But the idea of like, can you run it as close to the consciousness of the user, if you will, as close to them on the edge on the client side as possible. That to me is kind of where I'm looking for as my indicator of the leaps and kind of the technological innovation. So again, not hitting your question smack in the face, but more just kind of the lenses I'm looking through. I have not seen anyone in our particular swim lane of attention and emotion and now the identity things I'm working on who are jumping into where we're at kind of on this position at kind of the leading edge of that.
So I think a lot of the innovation has been driven by the spending on the generative LLM side, right? We just saw OpenAI's financials. They're spending like $5 billion a year, $3 billion on training, $2 billion on inference. Is anyone doing that in the computer vision space, spending that much money?
Not. Again, you're giving me some great research I want to go do after this. Not that I'm aware of. It's definitely not hitting the headlines. It could be that once somebody sees this, they comment on this video and say, you guys are missing it. Here it is. But I'm not aware of it. Okay. Certainly the zeitgeist is being captured by what you just said. More focused away from computer vision. Yeah.
So you were telling me off camera a really cool story about how you guys spun up a pretty large business. Well, we might not say the number, but let's suffice it to say, guys, that it's a big startup on its own. Just in the last 14 months, it was driven by a request for interest of a client, but you ended up creating a whole new product category within your business. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah. It's amazing. It's kind of a pinch yourself moment of like synchronicity of a career where you've had all these experiences of pivots and discovery and where signals lead you and hitting walls or hitting dead ends and stuff. But in this case, being like, wow, this is a happy path. This is a great learning opportunity. So the idea is we'd already had a pretty deep relationship with a leading consumer app company. Related to work we do in a number of fields, but one in particular was AI data collection. So we've built a competency in collecting data for models that could train computer vision systems, build avatars, whatever. We had a deep relationship with a company doing that and other things. And we had really powerful intelligence gathering from our co-founders to the extent I've never seen before, where I joined in the fall of 2022. And my focus area for the first several months was on finding scrappy startups who wanted to innovate with attention and emotion. So now your games, for example, can see the attention and emotion estate, your wellness app, your online education app, all sorts of things like that. In fall of 2022, we quickly saw startups were mostly just trying to survive. They're like, I'm not trying to innovate with computer vision right now. Thank you. That's cool. I don't have time. At that same time, we had this breadcrumb coming out of this sort of intelligence gathering from the co-founders with that consumer app company where we learned that they had a need for a face verification model. And it ties to what we were talking about before, the PR of them doing it themselves. It was such a hornet's nest, such a hand grenade that they'd realized we can't do that. And we have a need. And because of the serendipitous nature of how we got that intel, we were able to capitalize on it. We were able to get ourselves in the running in this RFI they were opening, go from 0 to 1 on a face verification model in 3 months. And by the grace of whatever, we won that RFI, partially due to the provenance of our data that is so unique that no one else has, that would allow us to demonstrate demographic fairness that hasn't been achieved before. So they saw lots of added value with us. We won that RFI. So this is March of 2023. And we were wondering, what other problems can we solve with this new competency? We've just gone from attention and emotion, proprietary technology. Now we've got this notion of identity. Because of our core business we've been running for so long, which is ad testing, where we participate in online market research, we acquire very discrete audience segments, bring them into an environment hosted by us, expose them to variations in ads. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, our proprietary classifiers for attention and emotion are running, and then like stitching together the context of what the users are experiencing with their attention and emotion engagement. And then at the back end, we deliver insights to brands and agencies, like for the audience of women who drive Subarus and have these characteristics. On TikTok, you should run the version of the ad with the red car, the female hero, third call to action. But on YouTube, you should run this other version. It's all to say, like, helping to de-risk media spend, channel specific. Because of that work we've been doing, we had been suffering for a long time, and it's only ramping up exponentially from this huge surge in online fraud. So bots, click farms, people pretending to be who they're not. The stakes are high in just the market research because you get bad data, and the insights and outcomes you get will be wrong, and you'll be leading your customers down the wrong path. But then as well, for the AI data collection work we do, the stakes are really high. So if I'm supposed to have a very particular audience segment giving feedback or giving inputs to an avatar training system, but it's the wrong audience, like that's a problem. So I'll just say, very near and dear problem for us. We were experiencing firsthand, and we knew the entire online market research industry was also suffering from this, and no one could solve it from the conventional tools and techniques. So we put together a hypothesis, a demo, and a point of view on it, and had a healthy Rolodex from our work in this market research space for so long. So we were able to get into the room, the virtual room, with the C-suite of the world's largest panels, so the supply side of online research, and buyers. Showed them a demo of what we put together as a hypothesis. If we see this problem, they all agree, yeah, fraud's really bad. 30 to 40% of what you're going to collect is likely, at minimum, going to be attributable to bots, click farms, and liars about who they are.
Wow.
Yeah, it's insane. It's very much like ad tech. So I used to work in ad tech, and the revelation that so much of that is fake too. So all to say, we brought this to people, said our learnings are the conventional tools don't work. The economics of this are such that you don't want to pay a lot to solve this problem. Let me show you this demo of what we did. And the idea is you can conceptualize as a gate. It can be in the context of a survey. The use case is like a survey gate as a simple way to demo it. So I'm a panelist. I'm on a platform. They've got my demographics. They say, Scott, I've got a great survey for you. Click here to do it. So I click, say, yes, I want to do it. I'm then redirected to this system. The system shows me the latest version of a GDPR compliant consent we've developed. We frame it as a humanity check. So I want to confirm you're human. And it's private and anonymous. We're not storing images. We are evaluating face math using an AI system. So the user gives consent. Then we capture access to the camera as a native browser notification. Once they do that, I capture an image off their camera, send it to secure endpoint hosting my model. There I generate a face embedding. To the layperson, I call it unique face math. It's like 512 irreversible data points describing the image. But can't be backed into the image. An application at that endpoint creates a collection, puts that face math in there. Well, first checks, is this already in here? If not, great, you're unique. So I know you're very likely to be a person and not a bot, because bots can't really get past this right now. You're unique. And I can also give age and gender estimations. So if my profile said I'm a 20-year-old woman, by that point, I would pass back the estimations of this is an early 40s male. But at that point, you know it's extremely likely I'm a human and I'm unique, but I'm lying about who I say I am. So you can decide, like, what are the criteria for the customer here? Do they really need a 20-year-old woman or just like a human? And the idea of doing all of that at 10 cents per call as the pay-as-you-go rate versus or at volume commitments that can come down to like fractions of a penny. And what we learned is there is an existing identity category, but it's very heavyweight, built for banks and governments. These are solutions like Verif on Fido, Clear at the airport now, or even on LinkedIn, where it's incumbent on the user to provide a government ID and a selfie. And these technologies will say, They'll parse different data off the passport, for example, say, is that a real US passport? Does it belong to Scott Jones in Chapel Hill? Do I think the selfie's the same person? And then with that, a risk assessment as to whether I might be a money launderer or a terrorist or what have you. Heavyweight for everyone involved, like big friction on the user, and it's very expensive. It tends to be like $1 or more.
Wow.
And so what we found is like, we've invented a new lightweight identity category. It can be anonymous. We don't know who anyone is. We're not saving images. We're just looking at face math. It's anonymous. It can work off any webcam, anything that can operate a browser. So like we're in production with customers right now, and people are on like mobile phones from 2010, and they're successfully doing this all around the world. And very fast. So it just takes a matter of seconds. So we're seeing it as kind of a really interesting replacement for the CAPTCHA, which has evolved so much because bots are so smart. Now humans struggle with CAPTCHAs.
Yep.
So what if instead it's just like, hey, anonymously prove you're a human?
Yeah. Then you'll have to just figure out that selfie is actually coming from that phone.
Yeah. And there's a whole set of a whole roadmap of things we're working on to mitigate risks like that, of spoofing, deep fakes, masks, all sorts of stuff. So it's very interesting stuff.
Okay, so basically you guys were in the ad testing category, and now you've moved into the identity verification category, and you've spun up an entirely new product that came from this RFI and this intelligence that your co-founders did. Along the way, I imagine there were some product development milestones, some MVPs that you launched that failed, some de-risking of big development efforts that you did. Can you walk us through kind of the more generic advice, less the specifics, more the generics of how you went 0 to 1 on this now many millions of dollar line?
Yep. So it's your classic stuff of I've got a vision of where I think I see this going. I've got the data I've collected from demos we've done so far. I've got all the intelligence I've gathered about the problem space, what tools exist right now. You build up this vision. Here's like this beautiful solution we could build. It's lightning fast. It's like amazingly scalable. It does all these amazing things, but I can't afford to build that right now. So it's the classic thing. I can see the Ferrari. I don't need the Ferrari yet. I can't justify building the Ferrari. Does it have to be a car? What is the thing that can solve a lot of problems like a Ferrari to go enough that I can get this out into production with a customer?
What's the horse buggy?
Yeah, pick your analogy. The product management is ripe for analogies. It's so fun. What is the thing that can demonstrate that I should build that Ferrari once I get the money flowing here, but what's the least I can do? So it has to be fast enough. It has to be scalable enough. It has to give the impression that this thing does the thing and solves this problem and makes customers' eyes light up like, holy shit, you can do that? That demo's amazing. Yeah, I want to try that out. But not like this is gold-plated, perfect. So that's the whole thing. The scalability, how many data centers you're operating in, what are your SLAs, like what is your support model? It's all of that stuff. Like how do I set a good impression that I'm doing like a really good thing, but not going to lose my shirt? So it's constantly kind of pressure testing those ideas and assumptions, and cross-pollinating those ideas. So it's constant conversations with engineers. Like this feels slow. What options do we have? Well, we could spend 6 months researching that. That's the right. Well, I can't do that. Well, we could do this thing where we cache it differently. Cool. Let's try that. All right. We did a test. It's marginally faster. Awesome. It's stuff like that. So you're finding your compromises. You see this zone of value and opportunity. You know, if you devote, like when we've worked at big companies where you have resources, you can just throw people at problems, be like, I'm pretty sure if I put a team on this for 6 months, we're going to get something awesome. Can't do that right now. So it's like, how do I triage? What do I think the slice is where I can prove that if I keep going after that thing, we should, and I can unlock this value flowing through where I can fund it. So that's like the game. And it's like super fun. And it's this balancing act, the constant deal of the here and now. And the stories you can tell, and you kind of get out your jazz hand. You like imagine a world where, well, look, it does it. But meanwhile, like it doesn't quite do it to that extent. I can do that with you in production, though. We could totally team up on that.
Love it. So I want to hear more about how you play the game. So you're a VP of product at a startup. I imagine you're not using, face recognition tech in your day-to-day as a VP of product, but more, as the product you build. What AI tools, is it ChatGPT? Is it Claude? What AI tools are you using in your day-to-day and how?
It's funny, I've answered a LinkedIn request for content on this a while back, and I was curious if anyone would say, oh, me too. I'm not super deep. I'm using it for pretty discrete things. And it's interesting, it's kind of siloed. So I go to ChatGPT for help with content. So it'll be like a slide. It'll be a phrase in an email. It'll be something where, like, you're an amazing writer. I love your writing. I would love to prime ChatGPT. Like, give me Akash's succinctity and like really impactful phrases with a paucity of words. It's stuff like that. I want to convey this. I don't want to say it that much. I want like a really snappy headline for this slide, or what's like a 2-bullet way to say this way too much. What's a better way? What's a more elegant way? Or I just, like this morning, I'm trying to come up with a field to add to a data model that we can provide to customers to help them identify fraud of people who come through our system but don't necessarily opt in to participate. And one thing we could do is we can measure how quickly they engage with the response, with the consent, how quickly they respond to the consent. And we'll see session times where a human could not have responded that fast. Well, it's like, well, what do I call that field? So we had a debate with the engineers on this, and they're like, well, I might call it this. I'm like, I might call it that. I bring up ChatGPT, and meanwhile, in real time, I'm like, what's an elegant way to convey? I want to get these ideas across. I don't want it to be this one, like 3 words, whatever. It gives you some. You're like, well, that's cool, but what about this? Oh, that's it. That's awesome. So that's ChatGPT for me. Perplexity is all about helping, and this is for my life too, like find an elegant answer for me. Like you brought your podcast setup to ChatGPT. I would be very interested in seeing what Perplexity would say, for example. So this idea of like real-time insights, finding like connective tissue between concepts, like doing research on your behalf, where I will say, oh yeah, I found the answer to your problem in some like esoteric software issue or some research you're trying to do. Like I was trying to do research on very particular brands who are likely to have grown so much with their research that they would use, that they might want my solution. They've grown so much that they probably have a big in-house presence. They've stopped using agencies. So it's like Perplexity. Help me figure that out. And then, hey, what would the job titles be on LinkedIn I should look for? What are some of the names? It wouldn't tell me the names of the people, but it helped me go a long way. So stuff like that. Yeah. Just making me smarter to navigate the ambiguity of like research and I don't know how I would approach that opportunity. I could just open-ended search the internet, but hey, give me some tips. Like, what would you do, Perplexity?
Okay, got it. So content and research seem like your 2 main use cases. Are you using like a meeting AI note taker? Are you doing anything to like improve your PRDs or your strategy docs or anything? Yeah,
so it's interesting. We didn't get into what it means for me to be VP of product at Realeyes, but it's fascinating. The company is extremely hardcore technology. So 2/3 of the company are engineers and data scientists. I've learned a lot from these co-founders too on building and running a business. So for my business unit that I was hired to build and grow, they are repeating how they ran the business, where going back to like 2007. So I am sales, marketing, business development, product. I'm like doing all the things as a single point, where I don't necessarily have to write these big artifacts of what I've discovered, but rather I'm kind of like the living real-time record. I'm like writing real-time notes with like, we have a group of advisors helping us. I have this kind of steering committee of the co-founders and advisors for this market research fraud play. So I'm like constantly cross-pollinating ideas and insights on what just happened. What do you think? This is what I think. For other aspects of the business I'm working on, very similar. So I'll just say it's very much very startup-y because my business unit is small. And just to tie it into how like the theme for me of 2024 on LinkedIn is so many people are building product management tools for product managers. I imagine you're getting a lot of inbounds like, hey, check this out. My story to them is I don't need them right now. Like I've got my arms wrapped about everything. I know I will when I grow this business to a point where I am then funded to hire a bunch of people. But right now it's like all me. Yeah. Which is exciting and scary and really cool. But and you learn so much, but at the same time, you aren't encumbered by kind of the overhead of the heavy documentation world.
Got it. Okay. So that's Realize. One of the other AI products that you worked on was actually Lenovo. You worked on their AI, and I haven't heard about them much in the AI world. I'm sure you probably have kept an eye on them and you have colleagues who are still there. What is Lenovo doing in AI, and is there anything super innovative or interesting coming out of there?
Yeah, Lenovo's really fascinating. I ended up going over there as an extension to the work extension might be a weird word, kind of a dotted line thematically to what I was working on at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. You could abstract it, the idea of a hardware company who needs a cloud story and like all the problems. You can't just sell hardware anymore. So what can you do? And Hewlett Packard Enterprise, that was through the lens of B2B. Lenovo's fascinating because they do B2B and B2C. So my first role there was actually on the consumer side. And the premise was I took ownership of a couple of separate products that were run by two different product managers. They both left, and the leadership team had a hunch that those should probably be combined and owned by one person. And it ended up being that I was the fit for that. The premise was one team owned an on-device agent, so you could opt in on your, as it is with most devices we purchase these days. You get that little, you boot up and it says, hey, you want to share data? Yes, I do. And the premise of this was this agent, if you opt in, would capture telemetry on how you use your machine. So the apps you use, the peripherals you might attach, what you do and do not do throughout the day, all sorts of things you could imagine being captured. That gets sent to the cloud, and I worked with a team of data scientists who had machine learning models that would look at those observations and then come up with opinions about who you might be as an audience. So the user behind this machine might be all these things: a student, a hardcore gamer, a business person using things like Excel. It's the idea of putting all those sorts of attributes on people. Then the other team was a team that owned a content management system and a series of SDKs for integrating with different surfaces in the Lenovo consumer ecosystem. So if you have a Lenovo laptop, they have a product called Vantage, which gives you like insights on how the diagnostics and things like that, but also markets content to you about your device. All of those surfaces had been one size fits all, so everyone saw the same thing. And the opportunity I found, and that I was able to, that was exciting, was the previous product managers didn't really find the value of those two separate things, but I was able to help the company stitch them together such that you could leverage those segmentations you're getting and use them to your advantage and create curated experiences. So part of it was helping the company understand that this system worked. And then let me show you some of the use cases. So putting together a test. We did a sort of test campaign where I targeted League of Legends power users, people who we see on their machines playing League of Legends a lot, and served them curated content in that Vantage application about League of Legends, and show that when you show curated content, pretty intuitive, but you'd see like an exponential increase in engagement. And then ultimately you can create a better relationship with those customers and sell them more stuff. So that was essentially, I got to use my ad tech playbook, ad tech, MarTech playbook, and say, guys, you've got the pieces of the puzzle right here. We've got an internal audience network. We've got this essentially ad network to reach them across all these different surfaces, across all their different devices that they might have, and start telling these interesting stories about how using the devices, what observations we have, interesting insights we can give. And oh, by the way, like I noticed the last time you were playing that game, your GPU couldn't keep up. Here's like an offer on something that would help you play that game better. And then finding that kernel of the opportunity and then doing a lot of really fascinating internal business development to then sell it internally. Like, look at this opportunity, hardware team. I can help you like test market ideas with this audience who could very likely be the next buyer for something on your roadmap, but you don't know if you should build it. Or e-commerce team, in your audience management system, I think they're using Adobe, you know the channel by what you brought people in, you know what they bought, but then it dies. I know what they did with what they bought. So now you can like upsell them on things. So it's like all of that, really fascinating. So I did that for a year. So interesting AI deployed on the consumer side. And then they reorged me to the commercial side, where it was predictive maintenance and the idea of AI running locally on a fleet of an enterprise's devices. So imagine like I'm a global consultancy. And I am the IT admin, and I am on the hook to make sure that 40,000 laptops around the world are working. The idea of this predictive maintenance system where each of those laptops has local systems running, looking at local telemetry, and then this kind of federated model where it's propagating data to a central place and sharing insights between them such that you can raise to that IT admin persona things like, we predict of your 40K devices that 10K of them are going to have a blue screen of death in the next week. These are the drivers you need to update. Hit this button to make it so. So like very, very interesting, very different ideas of AI towards making consumers have like better engagement with you and ultimately buy more stuff versus the pervasive challenge of kind of IT today of how can I do more with less and not have a vast team of people, but how can I just curate? There's a problem here. I see it coming. Click this to fix it. Beyond that, it looks like since my time, they're going deeper for the consumer side. They have a lot of AI, like machines that will optimize themselves for games you're running, stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. On the B2B side, a lot of what I've seen feels like continuing the themes of what HP and others are working on. Like using the cloud's hard, and you don't want to go all in on the cloud. You want to have a strategy that might include on-prem, your own cloud, and then maybe the hyperscalers. But navigating all of that's hard. So like, this is what we were working on 5 years ago at HP, and what everyone's still working on. Like, how do you do that? How can I make it real simple? I give you a minimal set of appliances and I give you software that can navigate like, oh, right now you should use that VM for that workload and hit the data here. And that's like the most optimal balance of speed and cost. But, oh, tomorrow you should run the workload in this cloud instead. I'll make it so. Like, that's kind of where those general, like, do it for me, strike up some elegance, solve these problems that are really hard that I'm trying to throw bodies at, and it's not working.
Okay, got it. So they've really embedded into a lot of their different product areas AI. It might not be those flashy demos like ChatGPT that consumers are seeing, but it seems like even your old tech companies, so to speak, like Lenovo and HPE, are embedding AI in all parts of their business.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last area of AI I wanted to ask you about is you're a musician. So I'm guessing you're tracking like what's happening in the audio AI space, things like 11 Labs. I recently saw on Twitter this morning a Keanu Reeves deepfake, and it sounded exactly like him saying a bunch of stuff that he didn't say, which was like pretty mind blowing. What is sort of your take on, and what is the coolest stuff happening in audio AI?
It's crazy. So being a musician, I have a foot in that world and a foot in the technologist world where we see this stuff and we say, oh my God, that is so cool. And then if I flip the script and put on my musician hat, the fear is real. So for example, it's called Suno AI. Suno or Sumo? I think it's Suno. It kind of broke into the cultural lens in the spring. And the idea of you can give it a prompt and say like, write me a song about doing a podcast with Akash about product management in the style of Blink-182, and it'll generate this thing where it sounds like a Blink-182 B-side about product management. It sounds legit. That when that showed up in the spring, I had the same duality of like we were sharing it at work, saying like, oh, what's it like working with the legal team on this Verify product, creating GDPR compliant consent in a framework that's never been done before. Here's a Blink-182 song about it. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then log on to Facebook and see musician friends in LA saying, did you see this? I'm afraid I'm not going to have a recording job anymore. So it's this interesting thing of making it very easy to create, very easy to do things, but at the same time, potentially continuing to devalue, if that's the right word, the human aspect of what humans who might not be asked to make those things anymore. So that line in the sand is an interesting one that I'm always navigating, but one really fascinating app that's been blowing my mind, I think it's pronounced Moises, M-O-I-S-E-S. Have you seen that one?
No.
I don't know how it might end up on your radar as I asked you that, as I think about it. But the idea is it's an AI system trained to parse the different instruments in a track, and it can isolate them. So it's really good for education. Like I'm studying drums, piano, vocals, whatever. I can put in a track I'm working on. It'll process it for not very long, and then it'll give me a mixer with all the parsed instruments. So here's the lead vocal, here's the guitar, here's the piano, here's the drums. And you can fade them out and say, all right, I want to work this Al Green song without the vocals. I want to hear me sing. But you can also use that to get the stems, so like the recordings from the studio of the bass part from like 1971, extract it and put that in your own environment to sample it or manipulate it or whatever. So also like very powerful, like things I could never imagine you could do when I started playing music in the 90s. It's like, that's amazing. Yeah, but at the same time, kind of tied to what we were talking about earlier when you were setting up your podcast environment here, the challenge I think is you could draw an analogy to like software developers. I don't want to get rid of software developers. I want to augment them. I want to make them feel more creative and expressive and not have to do the stuff they don't want to do, but they can create. Same with musicians. I would prefer AI does not say, hey, I don't need you anymore. I can make studio tracks now in 1 minute. But rather augment them, give them new creative ideas and insights, make it easy where I could say, hey, set up a session for me with a drum kit with 3 mics on it and these MIDI instruments and these things. And I don't want to have to do any configuration, touch drivers or whatever. And it's like, great, there it is. Or set up this guitar for me. I want it to sound like Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock on this particular song. Oh, cool. Yep, got it. Like those sorts of things. So it removes the friction of creation, but not necessarily taking the human out of it.
This episode is brought to you by WorkOS. If you're building a SaaS app, at some point your customers will start asking for enterprise features like SAML authentication and SCIM provisioning. That's where WorkOS comes in, making it fast and painless to add enterprise features to your app. Their APIs are easy to understand so that you can ship quickly and get back to building other features. Today, hundreds of companies are already powered by WorkOS, including ones you probably know like Vercel, Webflow, and Loom. WorkOS also recently acquired Warrant, the fine-grained authorization service. Warrant's product is based on a groundbreaking authorization system called Zanzibar, which was originally designed for Google to power Google Docs and YouTube. This enables fast authorization checks at enormous scale while maintaining a flexible model that can be adapted to even the most complex use cases. If you're currently looking to build role-based access control or other enterprise features like single sign-on SCIM or user management, you should consider WorkOS. It's a drop-in replacement for Auth0 and supports up to 1 million monthly active users for free. Check it out at workos.com/Akash to learn more. That's workos.com/Akash.
Okay, so across these AI technologies we talked about, computer vision, obviously text is the one everybody would have heard of, audio, there's also video, so there's like Pika and Luma Labs and different people creating like pretty cool video models. If you think about like maybe those 4, vision, text, audio, video, over the last 2 or 3 years, where has most of the innovation happened from your eye?
I guess my perspective would be the intersection of like video, audio, and text. And to your point earlier, it could be I'm completely missing the boat on computer vision innovations, but the 3 you just described are the ones I've been tracking the most.
Yeah.
But the idea of, it's really interesting. It's a constant thing I'm thinking about. Like the future is multimodality. So all of these things tying together in a very elegant way. So it's really agnostic of whatever the particular method you're using, but just aware of all the signals, which seems like it's not far away.
Okay, the all-in-one sort of multimodal single model.
Yeah, just from the testing I've seen us doing with foundation models, and they're just trying to keep up with the different things being publicized all the time. Like I can give it a single sort of video stream and it'll analyze the sound, it'll analyze the imagery, it'll analyze different aspects of it without me having to tell it so.
Now I want to move into the craft of product management. And you shared a funny meme. So how does a VP of product react when he hears that we closed a $20K deal that's going to cost $200K in product development time?
Yeah, they would react I'd imagine they would react in a few ways. The first would be, how did this happen? And how did I not know? So the notion of a postmortem, how did we get here and how do we not get here again? So I'd imagine that means better relationship, in greater alignment with the sales team moving forward, sales and marketing. In the very near term, I don't know if I'm answering this too like practically because it's a tough question, but in the very near term, I'd be trying to de-risk that. Like, okay, what does this mean? What did we sign up for? What are kind of the levers we can pull? How can I try to inject myself into this so that we land in a happy place where the customer's in a good spot and we are too? And there's a lot of nuance inside of what I just said and what that could mean. But that's what I would be thinking about. I would be saying, how can I possibly de-risk this and try to land this object that just fell out of the sky without creating a huge crater and figure out how we don't do it again?
Has that ever happened to you or something similar?
Similar in the sense that, and I wouldn't say it's happened where a transaction unfolds and you know right away, oh, you sold something and it's going to be like 10x for us to fulfill that. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I don't know if I've seen that, but I have seen like, oh, cool, you sold that thing and wow, we totally didn't understand at all what you signed us up for and there's so much churn. We've lost money on this. Like that's a recurring pattern for sure, where you don't know what you're selling. Promises are made, yeah, and then it's, well, we have to fulfill it. So I've seen that a lot, yeah.
And how do you handle that as a VP of product?
I would argue similar to what I said before, like diving in, how did we get here? How better can I enable the sales team, the marketing team? It depends on the company, like what kind of, who's at the table with you. A startup, it would be much easier. Like it's probably a couple of us figuring this out. But if it's like a large situation, it would be bringing the people together to figure out how did this happen? How can I enable you better? What cycles do we need? Because that's like your classic thing. I want you guys to be enabled with the reality of what we have, where we're going, and why. I want to empower you to like capture ideas and insights on where we can go. But I don't want you to sell things that don't exist or that are completely economically unviable for us.
So preventing the problem in the future is one element. And then the other you mentioned is like de-risking the feature. And you mentioned that earlier too. So I want to kind of go deep. Like if you were to give a masterclass to PMs on how to de-risk features the Scott way, how would you kind of describe that?
I think I saw this. It's crazy. There's so much great content on LinkedIn now, and I try to remember who did it. I think this came from Lenny last week. It was like this meter. It was almost like a dashboard meter you'd see in a car, and it was like your confidence level in a feature.
Yes, Itamar Gilad.
Yeah. Like that was awesome. It's like that's how my mind works with it, where you're constantly saying, I have this hypothesis. Like we said before, I think there's an opportunity if I build this Ferrari. I don't want to build the Ferrari and find out. Like every step is what's the least I can do to validate I should keep going. And that's like, to me, de-risking kind of 101. Like I don't want to commit to spend anything until I know that I should. And it's like that's generally the philosophy and kind of inner voice guidance I will always have. So it's like, what's the least I can do to prove that there is an opportunity here? So it could be like different strategies you have. Fake it till you make it, for example. This thing doesn't even exist yet, but I can pretend it does, for example. And you have to de-risk it by, can I like cash this check if somebody says, yeah, I want that? So like, an example of this I will never forget. I was at an ad tech company and we did a fake it till you make it with an API for campaign configuration. Said, oh yeah, we got an API. You just call it. And it created an email to go to someone who would then update your campaign. It's like, all right, I got this thing. Will someone pay for that? I didn't build it, but I faked it enough that the value is there. You can see the value and then I can justify, yeah, there's something there. I should go further. That's like generally how I approach it. And then through that lens, every possible decision you have, like what's the most important thing, the balancing act of I don't have infinite resources. I don't have infinite time. What's the most important thing I can solve right now to validate I should go that much further? And then I go that much further and I repeat.
And what's the fine line between like doing like a de-risking activity, like putting up a fake API endpoint, and then just actually going out and building an MVP of something?
Yeah, I think they are. I think they are tied together and conjoined. And the interesting philosophy of it is this balancing act of how I conceptualize it as like gated checkpoints. It'll even be like down to being hypothesis driven about an email I'm going to send to someone. Like I've never taught, like I'm selling right now, and I've never really done this before. I'm like selling to enterprises, like billion-dollar companies, and I've never really done this before. So I'm like writing up an email with a certain phrase, and I'm like, I've never written this quite. Let me test this. I'm going to test and learn from that and see what happens. And then the next time with that person or someone like them, I'll refine my approach. I view it the same way, where you have these like gated checkpoints, test and learn, test and learn. So even that notion of MVP, like you can grab that phrase and say, well, what does that really mean? It does one thing, it solves one problem, but enough such that you can validate that someone would go in and like keep going on that path with you. There too, it's that constant hypothesis driven, what's the least I can do to validate that I'm on the right path? I don't want to build all the stuff. I want to keep the kind of jazz hands going. If I see that problem, you validate that's a problem. Let me show I can solve it. I solved it, right? Oh, there's these other things I could do for you? That's great. I would love to know about that. We can go there. But let me validate I can solve. Like this is a valuable thing I can solve for you, and you would get in a commercial relationship with me for this? Great. Let's go deeper. So it's just, I don't think there's like it's not like a formula. It's definitely something where I don't think there's a framework. I don't know if you could actually populate that meter, but rather say, I've gotten to like the blue section. I feel good. Keep going. I've gotten here. Now I feel like very validated. People are going to start buying this. So it's like, it's a very philosophical thing, very entrepreneurial, very test and learn.
Okay. You've said try before you buy is the way for hiring for both sides. Say more.
Yeah, I got into this at Marketer Hire. It was a really fascinating experience that opened my eyes to. It's really amazing. The one of the founders there, the CEO, describes it as this notion of liquid teams. This idea you don't have to commit to full time. There's a whole new world available to us, and you just have to change the philosophy of people. And the liquid teams aspect can allow you to de-risk hires too. So if the premise of Marketer Hire, a really fascinating business model, it's like Uber for hiring the world's best marketers on demand. And the idea of, instead of having to like go through the typical hiring and firing stages of, I've got an open role, I'm going to spend 90 days recruiting. We were both smiling a lot during the interview, being like, yeah, I like you too. We don't know what it's like to work with each other. You get in the job, I'm like, please work out, please work out. You're probably like, please work out, please work out. If everything's great, it's great. If it's normal, you might stick around in the role for a year or 18 months, given the typical cycles. If it's not great, I then spend 90 days managing you out. So the idea of, well, what if instead it's like speed dating? I take your requirements, I find someone, and they're like, this guy's got the experience you're looking for. They've worked in the same industries. They've solved problems like what you're looking to solve. They've got case studies. You should meet them. Give them some work. If you like them, feed them more. If you love them, buy them out. Bring them on full time. And they use that same model for their hiring. So they started me as a product consultant for 3 months, working with their technical team on the problems they were working on, and like getting really interesting insights into the processes they had, the philosophies they had, how they, like what innovation means to them, how they go like the whole pipeline of ideas to what do we do to how do I know I should keep going, all of that. And by virtue of getting in and doing that work with them, getting to see up close how they work, how I work, we all get to be like, yeah, this is a cool vibe. Or, I don't know if I learned something. It's cool. We helped each other out. We'll stay in touch. So it allows you to do all of that without both sides having to like formally get into things that can be hard to undo without cost.
Okay.
So I found it to be very valuable. Not right for every situation, I'd imagine, but it's a pretty powerful tool to have.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. What situations isn't it right for? Because a lot of times, like if somebody is in another job, especially like a VP job, those are full on. You can't even take off a day realistically to go do a work trial.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely the thing. So this would be, you definitely have to scope it well of what you're capable of doing and the balancing act of what the, I don't even know the right word to use, what the hiree, what they can bring to the table, what they can commit to, and what the expectations are of the evaluating company too, and that team, such that you can all set up reasonable framing of what both sides are looking to do and learn so that you have a fair shot. Yep. But if it's like,
be flexible with what the assignment is.
Yeah. If it's like, oh, we carved off this thing and you're not giving us 40 hours a week. Well, I'm working part-time on this. So that was never the premise. Oh, well, it's not going to work. Like, okay. We could have known that up front.
Okay.
Yep.
So you've been in product management for a while. I'm curious, how has it evolved, the field overall and the practice of product management?
It's interesting. I got into it without a plan at all. It was just kind of the universe handing my destiny to me through a random career path. And that was like 2010. And at that point, I was essentially thrown into a waterfall environment. It's just like, we've knighted you a product manager. Here's a PRD. Here's a BRD. And these were like, not unlike what I described at HP with 150 page slide decks you have to fill out. These are like voluminous texts that you have to fill out. And the idea of the way we do the work is it's incumbent on the PM to describe everything, like spend weeks filling out this thing. Then you throw it over the wall to the engineers. They spend weeks with it. And then they come back and say, I got a plan, or you know what, on page 50, this won't work, so I can't do any of it. That's what PM was when I started. And luckily we had a new VP come on months later after I joined, and he came from the agile world, and he was all buzzword agile, scrum. And he said, hey, Scott, I'm going to use you as an illustration of the power of shifting away from waterfall. So I got to experience the pain of that. And I know it's suitable for certain environments, but not all. I got to see the pain of that as a PM, and then go into, well, cool, now I get to learn about agile. What is this philosophy about? And found that to be very exciting. And that has kind of continued now into the future, where we're in this place of like the buzzwords of agile versus the philosophical meaning of what it actually means and the value delivery for the business and the customers. It's like decoupling all this stuff. I think now we're in a place where there's philosophy that's understood. There's like ways of doing the work that I think people can convey and communicate and bring from place to place and kind of grow successful gardens with each other using these ideas, these ingredients. But then there's people who have latched on entirely to things like frameworks, to buzzwords, to like, we're doing it this way, this process, I got this certification, whatever, where it's like the experiences you gain and actually doing the work are maybe not as valued as having artifacts saying that you've learned about how to do the work. Does that make sense? Or
yeah.
Artifacts saying we're doing the work. I mean, look, we've got these certifications. We had this training session. The idea like there's a disconnect there, like the purity of the work itself. And I know I'm still being abstract about what the work is, but like the purity of product management is still what it is, and I think largely derived from the experience itself and not from all of this stuff, this kind of industry that's spun up around it.
Yes, it's a big industry around it. So one of the trends, I think, in the evolution of product management, at least in the last 3 to 4 years that I've seen, is a lot of PMs who are like lead PMs who had 7, 8 years of IC, they would become managers. They'd become group product managers, directors of product. I think in the last 3 to 4 years, a lot of those people have had to go back to kind of the super IC role. What's your thought on this trend? Is this a good trend, and where is it going to go from here?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually saw, and I don't remember who, again, on the the buzz of my LinkedIn feed, I saw a recruiter say, I'm seeing this theme of high-level product managers who've been VPs and that of that sort of ilk being called out, like, you seem like someone who's just going to be in the ivory tower. We can't have that. I need someone who's going to like do the work. So it's shifting back towards, he was saying, you need to have talking points on how you can be that high-powered IC. Because with the dynamics we're in right now, the free money's gone. Do more with less. Like, you're not going to get a role where you're just up in the ivory tower thinking about strategy and whatever. So that feels very real to me. The interesting thing for me was at Lenovo, at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, I was on a path where they had this kind of bifurcation. At Lenovo, they explicitly said it in a refreshing way where the typical thing doesn't have to be true anymore, where it's like, hey, you're a really good software engineer. You should manage people. Or you're a really good product manager. You should manage a team. It's like, well, those aren't the same thing. Those are like different skill sets and muscles. Sure, that person exists, but you don't necessarily have, those aren't necessarily coupled concepts. They're separate entities. And so Lenovo was really remarkable. The manager said, we actually have a track here. You'll get to make a choice if you continue. You can continue on like the IC track and essentially become like a fellow. It's almost like a distinguished engineer, but probably titles are coming, like distinguished product manager, stuff like that, where you are a high-level army of one. You are super valued in knowing how to get stuff done, knowing how to like make the sausage, knowing how to like cross-functionally change the world in profound ways. Or you can go on the management track and you'll do some of that work, but not really. It's more about building a high leverage team and coaching them to success. So that seems to be happening. I imagine that's more in like the super enterprise world. You're not going to see that at like a scrappy startup right now. So all to say, in my experience, I love the IC path. I love this idea of being like the army of one, where you can change the world if you build up the skills on like building relationships, the entrepreneurial journey of finding problems, working with teams to solve them, building the whole deal of influence without authority, that whole game. If you can build that up, you can like change the world as one person. But not everyone can do that. Like, it's probably not for everyone, which might lead to your next question about what's hard about product management.
He has the guide memorized, guys. Yes. Can you go through, like, what are the harsh realities? I think a lot of people probably listening are still even aspiring or young PMs. What's the harsh realities now that you've been in the field for 15 years that no one talks about?
I don't know if no one's talking about what I'm going to say, but one, it can be very lonely. Not just in a world working remote, like my team's all in Europe, so it's very lonely at home, but not just in a purely literal way, but it can be lonely in the fact that you are on the hook for making and owning decisions, and there will be folks, it depends on the culture in which you're working and in the environment in which you're working, but certainly when you start, there are going to be folks who you haven't earned their trust. And they're going to be like, I don't know if I want to stick my neck out for that decision. He seems like a smart guy. He seems like he knows what he's doing, but he's not proven yet. Like, that's pretty bold. I don't know if I'm going to go in with you on that yet. Like, prove to me. So you'll find that you are out on the edge, out on the edge of the cliff, being like, guys, trust me. I've done this before. Like, I see this opportunity. Here's how I'm going to approach it. And people are like, I don't know if I'm going to go there with you just yet. And with that dynamics of like, well, that's his idea. Like, if this doesn't work, he did it. Like, you'll find that dynamic until you earn the trust. And even with like just the ambiguity of this, they're like content or just common thoughts of you don't know what's going to happen. There's so much ambiguity. It's hypothesis driven, and you will not have complete information. You can't. If you get complete information, you waited too long. You probably lost the thread, and you probably lost your opportunity. You can't. So it's like, in a world of ambiguity, how comfortable can you be making decisions, and how comfortable can you make other people believing your decisions? And how can, to use that word again, de-risk it such that you've thought about this, and if this isn't working out, these are the signals you would see. So you can make everyone feel, he's thought this through. He's not just willy-nilly trying to break stuff. All right, I'm going to see what happens. That's one dynamic. Another dynamic is It's so entrepreneurial, and the entrepreneur's journey is you are going to be told no so much. You're going to be like it's like you're, again, pulling from analogies, you're going to feel like a founder depending on what you're doing. But the good news is you're funded. You have a company employing you. So it's not as risky, but it's the same deal depending on the framing of what you're doing. Where they're, in my case, very fortunate where I'm often told, we're here, we want to get there. We don't know how to do it. Like, lead us through this. Lead us through this innovation cycle. As you navigate that, you're going to hit roadblocks. You're going to be told no over and over and over. And it's like, it can be disheartening. It can be depressing. And inside of a day, like I won't forget at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, I would have a series inside of a day trying to network globally to find people to help me solve these problems I was working on. I would have 10 calls. 8 of them would say, you can't do that. You're crazy. That's impossible. But if you figure it out, let me know. And then like talk to someone. And finally, the 10th call that day, they're like, yeah, I think there's a way to do that. Talk to this guy. So it's this constant ebb and flow. You got to ride the wave. You can't take it personally. You got to know that behind 9 no's, there's a yes or something that'll help you get on your feet. Yeah. And then the other aspect top of mind that's popping into my mind is this, the work can be hard in challenging because of the scope of all the things you're required to know about, or at least it's this kind of idea of something I picked up recently where CEOs, you have to be able to manage stuff you don't understand. And it's like being nonlinear a bit, but the subject matter of like AI product management. It's like, what extent do you need to understand the technicalities of what your AI engineering team is doing versus I know enough to steer you in the right direction. I think I used a dumb analogy in a presentation I gave a couple of years ago. It's like, I'm guiding the chariot. I need to tell the chariot where I want to go. I don't need to know the intricacies of like what it's like to be a horse and like the psychology of a horse and like what they're thinking about as they run. I just have to be like, hey, horses, I want to go over there. And along the way, I can be like, you guys are running backwards. No, run that way. Or I can coach them in some ways, but I don't have to know the details of the running, so to speak, of what it is to like make that motion happen. I just have to keep steering. And that's like an interesting thing that applies to kind of the whole world of it. There's so much. There's data, analytics, legal, finance, supply chain, distribution, leading edge of technology. What can you do with electrons? How fast can data move? What is the speed of light? And versus how fast I can move data between data centers, like all of that stuff where you're like, I could become an expert, or I could just build up this ability to consume information and have like train my brain to be like, I think I hear an insight in there. It reminds me of a pattern I saw before. I'm orienting myself to it. Does that seem at all applicable? And they'll be like, no, or yeah, kind of. It's like this. Oh, okay, cool. So it's that. Like you have to, it's a lot.
I love that chariot example. I haven't heard that one before, but that really is the thing, right? Like guiding the horse, figuring out how to talk to the horse. That's really what you need to be the expert at as a PM. It's not being the horse.
Yeah. But then there are people who've been the horse, to keep the analogy going. There are horses who become PMs, and that's very valuable to them as long as you can balance it. Like the technical, God, I'm committed to horses. The technical horse who becomes a PM who knows too much about the technicalities to their own detriment, possibly, where they're like, horse, you're doing it wrong. Run like this. Like, don't tell me that.
Horses don't take too kindly to that. Mm-hmm. All right. What's your take on product management here in the Triangle? You've worked at a lot of the companies, I would say, that are the tent poles of product management here, whether it's Lenovo or HPE. What do you say are like the broad characteristics of PM here in Chapel Hill, Durham, Raleigh versus Silicon Valley versus kind of globally?
It's interesting. I would argue we have a very interesting environment here. That argument is not hard to make, but I would argue we have representation of all the sorts of different flavors of environments that you could operate in. So Hewlett Packard Enterprise is engineering driven. Product managers are there. Many of them were like engineers themselves who came up studying computer science and like what is the leading edge of how storage works and the theory of that. And And therefore, they're able to find these opportunities and insights from the deep kernels of engineering, kind of insight, like innovation, where they'd be like, I figured out we can solve this problem with backup recovery in a way that's never happened before. And like a PM would probably never think of that. But at the same time, then you're in the kind of, well, I've got a solution. Do I have a problem? You get into that world. There are lots of startups here where they're very small. Like if you go to American Underground, it's a vibe, man. It's a bunch of people, super scrappy, cross-pollinating ideas, companies of like one person, two people. The buzz is real. Like it's exciting. You've got like FANG companies showing up here. You've got talent coming in from those companies, from like New York, California, coming to work at Google now in Durham, coming like Apple. There's this like fascinating melting pot of opportunity here. And then as well, you have these, this is like one of the big value props for me to move here from Los Angeles, sight unseen, with my wife 12 years ago. She's from here. And she was telling me, this is an amazing place. We should move there. There's a great technology scene, like a great incubation scene, and amazing research schools putting out tons of talented people every day. So tons of talent. And then really interesting companies coming here, either startups who see the great ingredients to grow, or large companies coming here saying like, this is a great environment. I want to set up a shop here to work on Google Cloud. So lots of cool ingredients coming here, such that I would say there's many opportunities to cut across all the different aspects of product management and what it could feel like in a huge company, in a small company, one where you're in a box, one where you get to wear every hat. I think it's all here. I think it's pretty exciting. And I'm really excited about this probably multi-year dynamic of all this talent coming here from like Google and other name brand companies, name brand markets who are all moving here, and they might not stay with Google that whole time. So it's going to get really exciting.
Yeah, and it's really a melting pot, a microcosm, I think, of the product management world. You got almost every element of it. So now I want to move into career topics for PMs. And I want to start with job searching, because you've worked at a lot of these name brand companies we've mentioned. What is kind of your latest and greatest sort of strategic approach to the job search?
All my latest and greatest intel actually comes from you. You've been publishing. So my intel was like, my last search was 2.5 years ago, where then the market was not in a happy place, but it wasn't the current state of affairs. So we're talking like summer 2022. There, I played the game of mass applications through the front door, and I tried to network in to the extent I could to different opportunities, but largely it was a volume game where my resume and different keywords inside of it were enough to get a flash such that I would get responses. And in that search, ended up getting like over the course of a cycle of like 3 months, I think I had like 5 offers where Realeyes was the one I took. I know that strategy does not work today. So it's completely inverted. It's completely different. You don't go through the front door unless you just want to waste your time. So it's more, I've definitely come to appreciate this notion of think about yourself as like an SDR and you are trying to essentially growth hack your own career. Like, how can I get into the hearts and minds of these decision makers in clever ways that no one's thought of before, that position me in a unique way? And I loved it was a newsletter you sent out earlier this week with just kind of the funnel experience of one of these PMs you interviewed who landed a job where it was the top of the funnel was huge. And each step of conversion rate was quite narrow. The percentages looked kind of friendly, but it was not like I put 100 applications in the machine and get like 20 out. It was like I put 100 applications in the machine and maybe I get 1. Yeah. So it's a different world. It's like, it's a numbers game and it's a relationship game. And I feel like we're in this shift where recruiting has been reinvented on the fly. Like the analogy that passed in my mind as I just said that is like Google search just reinvented on the fly, saying they need an opinion against like the AI surgeons coming against them. So like, oh, put search results on the top, or put our AI curated search at the top. Similarly, it feels like recruiting has done a dramatic shift we can't afford recruiters, ATS systems, automation. And now it's just like you might bleep this out. It's a shit show and it's broken. And now how do you hack around that? But it's going to resolve. This isn't tenable, the current world we're in. So you're not going to have to hack around it forever, but we need equilibrium to be restored.
Yeah, it's not equilibrium yet. In your experience with all these VP of product searches, what is like the typical interviews you encountered in the process?
Yeah, I think it abstracts to what I saw in that cycle. It was VP of product, it was group and sort of similar like that roles where you're over a group of product managers, and then also some of those high level IC roles. Generally, I would argue they all kind of abstract to the first thing. The first order is the hiring manager. Like, does this person seem like they know product manager? Do they seem like they do the job? Do they seem like a cultural fit? They seem like someone I'd want to work with. After that, yes, great. Now you do a round robin with a couple of team members of theirs. If you get to that step, then they're going to have you go a layer deeper. And great, seems like a personality fit. Generally seems like they understand in a conversation, they can talk the talk, but now let's get real. So it'll split into one, it's like an and or from what I've seen, homework assignment and like a live case. And that homework assignment can be, I saw it play out a few ways. One was it's just you and the hiring manager, where you're presenting your ideas to them, you talk through it, or it could just be async and you send it to them and they say, yeah, that's reasonable. Or it could be you're presenting your homework assignment to a panel, and or that's also a case where they react to your ideas and then they just throw new stuff at you. Well, what if, and suppose this happened, and suppose that happened. And then from there, potentially more, if you graduate from that, it'd probably be meeting then the higher leadership level to say, we've vetted this person, we feel good about it. Now, senior leader, do you agree that we can bring this person into the fold? And then there might be stuff related to that. And then Realeyes was really interesting. My cycle with them was like 2.5 months. It was pretty intense, and it ended with me presenting a plan for how what I would do. Like, you've got this platform play. We've shared all our research, all our learnings. We got it to here. What would you do? So it was like presenting that plan, which is super exciting. And then these co-founders who are super impressive, who've built this amazing company since 2007, then kind of punch you in the face and be like, all right, well, what if this? What if that? Suppose this happened. How would you know it's working? What would be your signals if it wasn't working? Okay. And then that kind of deal. So you're proving, you're a cultural fit, kind of a vibe fit. You're cool. Like, they like you. They like working with you. You're engaged. You can do the job, like, because you're synthesizing what is it like to work with this person. So it's all just de-risking, and then coming away from it, does this seem like a complete package where we'd feel comfortable of them being able to add value here?
Yeah, I think people would be surprised, but that's not exactly what I encountered for the VP jobs versus the group or the IC. Is the VP almost always ends with like, give us your actual strategy of what you're going to do. So with just the context you had in that 2.5 month set of interviews, they kind of expect you to come up with your 90-day, 6-month plan. How do you approach those?
Well, I think part of it too, just to jump on to how you frame that, I think part of this too is like another checkbox they're trying to check in their evaluation. I saw this written in a job posting I shared recently. I can't remember the best way to say it, but it's almost like presence in the room or something. That's not the right way, but like, it's like we've all worked with people who are like amazing engineers, amazing data scientists, whatever, but they can't communicate. So it's like, hey, Steve, go tell them your idea. And they're like, I'm uncomfortable. I can't do it. So they're trying to test, like, can you think on your feet? Can you own the room? Can you like make us believe in you, even though we know you don't know what you're talking about? So that's like another check. Like, are you someone we can put in front of these very senior customer opportunities we have, and like you can be credible and like win? So that was definitely a dynamic. But to your point about the 90-day plan, it's I would see it as kind of your classic road mapping exercise of what do I know right now? What hypotheses do I have? It's like the now, next, later kind of vibe of the here and now. And you can imagine you're jumping into a job for the first time. You can probably imagine at an abstract level what you'd want to do, what you'd want to learn about at these high level building blocks. And then from there, the signals you get, now I would shift into, all right, I'm going to test some ideas from what I saw from the signals. Now I'm going to start trying to build some solutions. So like you try to paint that picture showing you don't know everything, but you have a credible approach of how you would navigate that ambiguity. And you come up with an opinion and that you then show and make it like a piece of clay we shape together, just as you would with a roadmap with constituents. So not pressuring yourself to say this has to be the right answer, but just this is an opinion given limited information right now that I can use to show that I'm a credible person and a great partner that you're going to want to work with.
Building great products is not easy, but today's podcast partner, StatSig, provides a complete platform for product growth. Here's how. Step 1. Keep building features behind feature gates. StatSig will allow you to turn these on whenever everything is ready. Even better, you can just open a feature to 5% of your users to validate it before launching. Step 2, run A/B experiments easily. You can make data-informed decisions about your product. What's even cooler, StatSig will give you valuable insights based on events you log. And step 3, analyze. StatSig is a full tool for product analytics, session replays, and web analytics. Used by customers like OpenAI and Notion, StatSig is the most modern all-in-one data platform. And best of all, it can be used as fully cloud-hosted or run on top of your data warehouse. So check out statsig.com/growth. And if you reach out, tell them Akash sent you.
Yeah, and my approach was always kind of like go above and beyond. They would always tell me like, spend 5 hours on this, but I found that that's never really realistic, right? You have to spend like 3 times as much time as they say.
Yeah, the time boxing is interesting. And it's interesting for some PM jobs, just to say it for the people who might be aspiring. I had watching this show, I had a pre-screening homework assignment. I don't know if you've seen that before. So before they even talk to you, it's like, oh, thanks for applying. Here's an exercise. It's like, I don't. That's an interesting signal.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know if I want to date you yet, and you're asking me to like pay for dinner or whatever. It felt kind of like.
Literally.
Kind of like that. Yeah. Like we're jumping ahead. But alternatively, yes, to your point, it almost, sometimes when they time box the exercise, it almost feels like it's a joke. Like they're trying to see, is this person really going to only spend a minimum amount of time and then give us kind of a piece of crap? Or will they behind the scenes make it work and pretend or not even bring it up?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the whole game anyway. It's like, how do you present your ideas and insights and still land on your feet? Because you're not going to have all the time you need to make a presentation. So like I'll be adjusting slides as people are coming onto a call. And I'll be like,
Yeah.
lumps of clay. All right, I got a story here. Cool, let's go. Got it. Or like, all right, I've got my slides. This deck. I know I'm going to hop to that one during my screen share. You're like laying out the storyboard, and then you just like improvise.
Yeah. So one interesting thing about your career is that you've had a lot of fairly short stints, whether it was like a year and a half at HPE or a year and a half at BASF, some of these like less than 2-year stints. What's your take on job hopping and crafting a career?
I think it's all about the storytelling. And that was like, so 2 years ago, that was very much on the minds of people when I was in my search. Where I ultimately landed at Realeyes. And in fact, I will never forget my now boss asking me that question in our first interview, where he did this like very intense kind of evil eye gaze at me. He's like, so tell me about, it looks like you're a job hopper. Tell me about that. And kind of looking at me like this. So it's all about the story you can tell. If it's not just, oh, I was chasing money or everyone sucks and I'm awesome. These leaders are terrible. I'm the smartest person on earth. Like if that's your story, it's not good. Or, I got offered more money and I just kept chasing. Like that's not a good, no. It's more about what was the context? What was the opportunity and why, how did it play out? So in my case, it was, I was at, Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and I joined that business unit to work on as a service storage. A new business unit is as a service in Hewlett Packard Enterprise portfolio, and solve all these problems that never been solved before about how you do that in a legacy hardware company. And I thought the premise was I was going to be working with engineers, but it turned out I ended up innovating through PowerPoint by like hacking these systems. And it was really cool, but it wasn't sexy product management stuff that I thought I'd be doing. And then at Lenovo, a former colleague hit me up and said, we're working on really cool cloud stuff. That was a dumb way to say it. We're working on really cool opportunities and innovation at the intersection of cloud and hardware. It's a lot like what you're doing at HPE, but we're swimming in data scientists and engineers, and you would kill it here with your experience. So that was like very compelling. Work on the same story, but actually get to work on innovation as I'd like to with technologists. So that was super exciting. So did that time at Lenovo, success on that first year, then got reorged to the commercial side, and then Hewlett Packard Enterprise came back. My manager came back and said, would you come back? So, you know, before we didn't have engineers, all that stuff we worked on where we like set an archetype for the business at large about how as a service businesses can run. When I left, the leadership team of the storage business unit saw that, and they like elevated this group and said, oh my God, you guys are like solving these problems. We should propagate all your learnings and like take your ideas and push them across the entire business unit. So my group was elevated. We went from like a handful of engineers to hundreds. It's just like a whole different leverage ratio than what I saw before. And he's like, would you come back? I was like, well, that's okay. Yeah, I would. There were reasons why it was compelling about my experience at Lenovo, so I came back. And then this consulting side hustle started brewing for me, and I could make it work. Marketer hire came along. They said, we'd like to have you help us as a consultant for product management. 3 months of that, both sides were like, wow, this is awesome. They were on like a really ridiculous growth curve that was remarkable. And they said, we would like to have you join us as VP of product. And I'd never been a VP of product before. And they were on a path that was insane, where they'd reached this like classic hockey stick growth curve, mid 8-figure ARR in 2 years using low and no code tools. And they wanted to become a technology company. And they're like, we think you're the guy to help us do it. And I was like, what? I wasn't looking for this, but I can't say no to that. So that was the story on that one. And when you tell these stories, a reasonable sort of audience will be like, that makes sense. But then there's going to be people who are like, I don't care, you're a job hopper. And that'll happen. They'll just see your resume and be like, no, NFW, if you know what that means. So no, I've seen this pattern before. I don't trust you. So in some cases it's a non-starter and there's no way around it. Mm-hmm. But I argue it's the narrative. And if you truly have like good intentions behind those decisions, and it's not like you're toxic or I'm just chasing dollars, I think the story will resonate with the audience in the environment you're meant to be in.
Okay. Last question. There's probably a lot of aspiring AI PMs here, whether they're regular PMs or they want to break an AI PM because they see the high salaries, the high demand. It's one of the only PM sectors that's growing. What's your advice to aspiring AI PMs?
It's a very dynamic area of advice right now. Yeah, I guess on the one hand, I would try to split it. I would try to think about different swim lanes. So one is, and I can't remember the name of the really impressive AI product leader you just interviewed at Google. Starts with an M.
Satyajit Salgar?
I can't recall. But all to say, you've got a track where you say, I aspire to be an AI product manager in the creme de la creme top technology companies, versus I want to get experience anywhere I can in a company and be employed to do this, versus there are so many tools available now where you can be an AI product manager. You can build stuff right now and solve problems and essentially claim that. Like, I used AI tools to build something that solves problems. I grew it to this state of a user base, or whatever sort of narrative you can tie around that. And that can become your currency to sell you into that tier, if I'm still keeping my tiers in the sky. That can take you from, I really want to get into that space. Well, shit, you get the chicken or egg. Well, we need people with experience. Well, hey, I've got experience. I built something. It solved a problem. I used AI tools. I stubbed this thing together. Look, And that can get you in the door in this next tier up, where it's a company who wants to use AI. They need this kind of product-minded person to steer the chariot. Are we solving the right problems? And it could be that you get to continue tying together these tools, or it could be you've demonstrated that you can now work with technical teams who would do it for you because you understand kind of how these Lego blocks can hook up to solve problems. From there to getting into the top tier, I'm not sure. But I would argue, I think there is a tangible way to go from I have no experience to having a cool story you can tell technology companies at these lower tiers using kind of readily available things right now.
Yeah, that's exactly what's worked. And it works even to break into the top tier. I've had people do that, break into Databricks, which is one of the biggest pre-IPO companies. People break into Google, Microsoft. So I love that approach.
What did they build to get? It'd be a fascinating just bullet point case. What did they build to get Databricks' attention?
So for Databricks, this person in particular, he built a consumer D2C, just regular AI app, but he talked to them about how he handled the data models, how he used different APIs. So they were confident that plus his data PM background were enough to hire him. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
D2C AI. I want to learn more about that. That's cool.
Yeah, he got to it about $1,000 in MRR. So nice little side project.
I just saw this. I saw this thing where I guess it's not AI, but it will be soon, where it was a really dumb thing on Instagram where it's like, it helps you with pickup lines. Like you tell it where your thread left off and it's like, here's what you should say next.
Yeah. That's the type of app. Yeah. You just find a niche problem. You solve that problem. You get people to pay you for it. And yeah, companies really respect that.
Yep. And that just to tie a little line to that, that's like those are the kernels of what we're expecting to be these billion-dollar companies run by one person.
Yeah.
Where you don't need a team anymore. You don't need VCs. You just need I've got the pieces of the puzzle. I got a hypothesis. Let's see.
Yeah, we're going to see more of those. All right. So this was a wide-ranging conversation. If people want to find more of you, where can they find you online and how can they help?
I am on LinkedIn. I think on there I'm Scott Jeezy. I think that's right. I'm on Instagram. I'm also Scott Jeezy. That's Scott Jeezy. How can they help, or how can I help them? I love just cross-pollinating ideas and insights. So I'm always up for a 30-minute intro call with people who are working on interesting things or hitting challenges. On my side, I'm currently working on disrupting how we deal with online fraud. So going real deep in market research right now, but there's so many verticals after that, like the ticketing industry, content moderation, marketplaces, the sharing economy, where a huge problem of bots, click farms, people creating lots of accounts to commit fraud and not having scalable ways to address it. So that's where I'm going next and looking for opportunities to share what I've got.
All right. Scott, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. So fun.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find out about the podcast. You can find all the past episodes or learn more about the show at product-growth.com. See you in the next episode.